Every morning he kills the same metal slime in his backyard. It became something like a farm. No magic talent, no destiny, just pure grind. While others chase dreams, he farms one monster on repeat. Why not try eating it too? Now, day by day, his body turns into living black steel. From nobody to the king forged by routine. What if the weakest grind makes the strongest king? Let's go. The story begins in Japan, in the apartment of the protagonist, Yuma Mitaka, a second-year high school student. He was watching the news, which reported on a huge pit that had appeared near the pier in Harumi. Apparently, the authorities were already sending a team to investigate it, but it looked like the dungeon was going to be quite large. He was lying on the couch and listening to the news. There were currently 5 dungeons in Japan, and this would be the 6th if it was recognized. Yuma was watching a video on his phone about the dungeon channel. In the video, a man in glasses visited a white dungeon in Sapporo and planned to clear the 18th floor. He saw fairy monsters and decided to use thunder magic. The fairy dropped a magic stone, a pure white moonstone worth at least 1.5 million yen. The protagonist put his phone down and thought it was complete nonsense. 7 years had passed since the dungeon's appearance, and at first, the underground labyrinths had inspired fear and anxiety, but now this huge industry had become part of everyday life. He thought about the magical stones created by these unknown creatures in the dungeons, whose magic could be harnessed. MC licked his ice cream and realized that even after the appearance of something so unreal, only a few managed to profit from it. Those supported by corporations, those worthy enough, powerful enough, and recognized by the government, those already popular and able to find sponsors. Yuma sadly rolled over on the couch and realized this is simply unfair. Nothing in the world is changing, and even a normal guy like him has no chance. He heard sounds from the street and decided to check. Yuma went to the window and asked his dog why he was barking. He was usually quiet. The protagonist looked outside and asked if someone had gotten into the yard. MC untied the dog and they went for a walk. The protagonist realized that no matter how hard he tried, it was all in vain because he wasn't smart or talented, and there was nothing special in his life, or so he'd always thought, until he discovered a hole in his yard. Yuma grabbed a flashlight and decided to go inside. He thought the ground had sunken, but realized it was some kind of strange cave. The protagonist looked deeper into the cave and saw something there. He saw a slime and asked what it was. MC remembered seeing something similar on the phone. Yuma checked the monster wiki and read that slimes have transparent bodies, but can come in blue, light blue, red, and green. He realized the one in the hole was different, and maybe it wasn't a slime. The protagonist decided to read the news from foreign dungeons and read that a very fast and durable steel-colored slime had been discovered in America, but the details were unclear due to the blurry photos. He realized that such a creature had only been seen a couple of times and that it was definitely a slime. The protagonist also read that no one had yet managed to defeat the discovered steel slime. He was very surprised and realized that if he could defeat it, he would become the first in the world. Yuma looked at his phone, wondering if such a tiny hole could be considered a dungeon. He decided to talk himself out of it and thought about how dungeons and such were the only places where only idle slackers went. Yuma watched as the person on the phone told him that the profession of a dungeon explorer was very dangerous and suggested he consider it. He realized that magic stones sell for millions of yen and this dream could become a reality. The protagonist returned to the dungeon and climbed inside. He noticed the passage is narrow, it won't escape. He gripped the hammer tighter and thought, so small, it can't be that dangerous. Yuma took a small swing and hit the slime. The protagonist realized that this slime was very hard, and it began to bounce around the cave. The slime bounced back into his hand, hurting him. Yuma returned home, applied ice to his hand, and realized it was harder than he thought. The protagonist told his dog about the evil monster in that hole and asked him not to approach it. He clutched the phone tightly and wondered how he could defeat something like that. Yuma read the slime's stats. Very weak, even a child could defeat the monster. The protagonist noted that this was all a dirty lie and a sham. He thought that the slime moved no faster than a person, and the danger was minimal. A physical attack was enough to defeat it. Yuma didn't understand. Then what was that all about? MC read the following information. Moreover, against strong monsters in the depths of dungeons, physical attacks often don't work and magic is required to defeat them. The protagonist thought, but this pit is always a meter deep. What a tiny dungeon. He realized he couldn't use magic, so he had no choice but to surrender. Yuma closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, but suddenly a realization struck him. He scratched his chin and suggested, steel? Maybe fire would work on it then? MC decided he could defeat it with fire without magic. The protagonist took a burner for a home barbecue and returned to the dungeon. He decided not to get too close and to be careful. Yuma lit the burner and aimed it at the slime. The slime began jumping around the cave again and hit him in the leg and back. The protagonist returned home and collapsed exhausted near the sofa. He thought sadly that he'd had enough and would block the entrance and pretend he hadn't seen anything or report it to the appropriate authorities. Yuma remembered the news saying that when a dungeon appears on private property, you should contact the police or local government. What a hassle. He was upset because he thought this was his chance, but he realized he had no chance. MC thought, If he hadn't discovered the pit, he wouldn't be suffering from pain and unnecessary problems now. He couldn't understand why he should suffer, because it had always been like this, and nothing good had ever happened to him. Yuma sat by the window and looked at the pit. The protagonist decided that he shouldn't poke around where he shouldn't, and realized he was still thinking about it. Yuma reached into his closet and pulled out a box. He found a cooling insect spray inside that freezes insects in place, and decided that it might work on the steel slime too. The protagonist realized that slowing the slime wouldn't defeat it, but what if he immediately set it on fire with the blowtorch? Yuma had heard that steel becomes brittle if heated immediately after cooling. He angrily decided that if this didn't work, he would give up. The protagonist decided to make his final attempt and approached the pit. Yuma sat on the edge of the pit, waiting for the slime to leave the cave. He realized it was holed up deep inside and would have to crawl inside. MC settled down next to the slime and thought. He decided to first spray it with spray to cool it, and after ice formed on the surface, light it with the blowtorch. The blowtorch in Yuma's hands began to blaze. The protagonist realized the gas was explosive and he should be careful, as it was close. MC saw that the gas remained in the hole. It wasn't moving toward him, and this was his chance. He saw that it worked and thought, if he hits it right now, it should be pretty fragile, right? Yuma looked at the hammer he had come with the first time and picked it up. The protagonist swung the hammer and hit with all his might. He saw a shattered slime and realized he had succeeded. MC looked at the place where the slime had died, but did not see the magic stone, as nothing had fallen out. The protagonist laughed, stretched, and decided that it couldn't be helped, but he had succeeded after all. Yuma told his dog about dealing with the monster and was completely exhausted. He decided to cover the hole with just cardboard. MC thought, that's it. The furious battle between him and the strange slime was over, or so it seemed to him. The next morning, the protagonist woke up in his bed and heard the dog barking. His mother told him that the Mamazu hadn't stopped barking since early morning and asked him to go see what was there. Yuma went out into the yard and approached the dog. Mamazu led him to the pit and sat down next to him. The protagonist removed the piece of cardboard and saw his old friend, a steel slime. Meanwhile, Tel Aviv, Israel. Dungeon exploration expert Ethan Noble was at the International Dungeon Research Organization. Assistant Clark Griffin entered the office and said, "Here it is." Ethan, smiling, looked at the enormous stone tablet discovered in the middle levels of the world's deepest dungeon, Orpheus, and said he never got tired of it, no matter how much he looked. He studied the hieroglyphs carved on it. The tablet read, "When the king of monsters awakens, as prophesied, the world will descend into destruction." Yuma, with a dissatisfied expression, walked down the street and thought, day after day, slime, slime, slime. He couldn't understand what was happening. The protagonist bumped into his childhood friend Keide Ichinose without noticing. She waved at him and said, displeased, "Met such a beauty and all you can say is, what's going on?" Keide noticed how good he had become. Usually he barely made it to class, but lately, he'd even show up early. She smiled and said, "They'll be moving up to third year when spring comes, right?" She added, "Have you decided to get your act together?" Yuma thought with a disgruntled expression. Third year. He looked at her and said that wasn't the issue. Keide asked him, her voice filled with concern, if he knew what was going on with Rui lately. The protagonist calmly replied that he didn't know, since they were in different classes. His friend overheard him and remarked that they'd often hung out together as children. Keide told him that Rui wanted to find a job in dungeons after school. MC grinned maliciously, looked at her and said, "Dungeons?" Yuma remarked, "I didn't know Rui was such a hype monger, considering dungeons are such an unstable thing." His friend, surprised, asked, "What?" She looked at him in surprise and added, "Doesn't he know? The dungeon business is booming right now?" Keide explained. He's aware that there are several types of dungeons, including magical stones from the White Dungeon, which can heal illnesses and injuries, which is apparently why healthcare organizations are so interested in them. Yuma looked at her silently and thought about how he didn't care. The protagonist silently thought, healthcare? A popular business? He'd never heard of such a thing. His friend smiled and told him that Rui was really cool and had a clear vision of his future. She asked the protagonist if he knew what he wanted to do in the future. Yuma smiled and replied, well, he was thinking in his own way. The protagonist decided to look on his phone. Facts about dungeons for children. In the video, the toy monsters explained that they regularly resurrect in dungeons. Yuma was surprised and realized that he could grind magic stones to his heart's content. He finished watching the video and heard about a 1% drop rate. Hard, he said with displeasure. What kind of grind is this? The protagonist noticed that slime had appeared again. MC scratched his chin and thought, wait, 1%, right? He realized that if he kills one a day, he'll get a stone in 100 days. Yuma thought this was the thinking of an elementary school student. MC thought, this slime is very rare, so a magic stone from a rare monster could be worth almost 100 million yen. In other words, 100 million every 100 days? He realized that with a 1% chance, the victory rate in 100 tries is only 63%. Yuma remembered his friend's words. Rui is really cool. He can see his future. The protagonist thought for a moment and realized that maybe easy money awaits him too. Yuma raised the hammer above his head and said joyfully, besides, He still has his whole life ahead of him, and millions right under his nose. However, back then, he still didn't understand the cruel reality of his plan. He smashed slime day after day, but still found nothing. The protagonist knelt in the cave and realized that magic stones don't fall. Yuma burst into tears and said bitterly, "Enough already, this is too cruel." He looked at the dog with tears in his eyes and noticed that all his allowance was going on cooling spray and burners. MC told Mamezu how tired he was of all this, because nothing was dropping from it. Mamezu licked his face and tried to calm him down. The protagonist thanked the dog for its support and asked, "Does he understand him, right?" Yuma understood. Exactly, he can't lose hope. MC looked at the spray and burner in his hands and thought about waking up every day with nothing and throwing money into the trash, all for his millions. The protagonist silently wondered if they were on sale somewhere. Yuma remembered Keide's words. Had he already decided what he wanted to do in the future? He looked at the cooling spray, lowered his head, and said sadly, "I have no idea." The protagonist didn't know if he was really ready to put up with this. Yuma, on the morning of February 2nd, met his childhood friend, Rui Awasawa. Rui wished him good morning with a smile. The protagonist saw him and quietly said, "Speak of the devil." Confused, Rui asked, "Who?" Yuma said, "Forget it." MC saw the gift bag in his hands and remembered it was Valentine's Day. But that wasn't his thing, so he'd completely forgotten. The protagonist said that all this chocolate impressed him as always. He asked what he'd do with it. Rui calmly replied, "I'll share it with my family," and offered to share it with the protagonist. Yuma answered loudly and sternly, "No way, he doesn't even like sweets." Rui smiled and was surprised by what he heard. MC knew it was a lie, because he loved sweets. He remembered again how his friend had told him that Rui wanted to find a job in dungeons after school. Yuma wondered if he should ask him in person. He turned away, squinted, and thought, no, he's not interested in this at all, not one bit. Rui smiled and asked him, did he get chocolate from Keide? He added that he hadn't received any in a couple of years. The protagonist remembered how he received it every year and became curious. Rui noticed that class was about to start and said that he had to go. Yuma continued to stand there, perplexed. The protagonist was pacing near the school and accidentally bumped into Keide. The girl turned sharply and slapped him. Yuma indignantly asked her not to hit him. It hurt. Keide said it was his own fault. She wanted to give him chocolate and didn't think he would run home so early. MC wasn't planning on going home. He wanted to run into Keide, so he was bending over at the school gates. The girl smiled and handed him the chocolate. She asked, "He hasn't received any from anyone else this year, has he?" Yuma answered rudely, "Don't make things up. He's received a couple." Keide asked to see it, and saw how his face changed dramatically. She asked him, "Will he say thank you or not?" The protagonist pressed the chocolate to his chest and thanked her. The girl laughed and replied, "You're welcome." She told him they'd see each other again and went the other way. Yuma caught up with her and said he should know, as he'd heard she hadn't given the chocolate to Rui. He asked, his voice filled with worry, then why was she giving it to him? Keide looked at him pompously and replied, "It's obvious, isn't it?" She smiled and added, "Rui already gets a whole bunch of them. She'd be upset if he didn't receive anything, and as a childhood friend, she's obligated to maintain the balance." The protagonist was dumbfounded by her words and upset. As darkness fell, the protagonist returned to the pit. He angrily sprayed slime and thought, "Screw this balance." Yuma thought about Keide and slammed the slime hard into the ground. He said angrily, "So slime, there you have it." The protagonist smashed the slime and gasped, "What is he even doing? Seriously? Nothing good ever happens." He heard strange sounds behind him. Yuma turned around and saw a magic stone slowly emerge from the smoke. He saw it and froze. MC glanced at the fallen stone and realized, just like that, after killing steel slimes every day, this was the 181st day. The protagonist screamed with joy at the top of his lungs and ran home. Yuma ran home and shouted, "Finally!" He sat down at the table and opened his palm with excitement. MC whispered, "Finally, he got it." Yuma looked at the stone and thought, the magic stone, finally, after half a year. The protagonist started dancing and shouting about what he should buy first with his millions. And now he'll be able to buy some expensive food for the Mamezu, he thought. And then, the protagonist looked at the stone and wondered, is this really a magic stone? He expected it to sparkle somehow, so he wondered if it needed polishing. Yuma decided to check the information online and typed in a search query. He realized it actually looked more like iron or something similar. MC visited a website with information about the Black Dungeon and learned that, unlike the White Dungeons, which drop magic stones with healing properties, research into Black Dungeons hasn't progressed far enough due to their low popularity. It also said that the drops from monsters in Black Dungeons aren't magic stones, but steel ore, known as magic ore. Researchers speculate that magic ore should increase physical abilities, but it's barely noticeable, or unclear whether they actually increase. Yuma read with a disappointed expression, "It's not worth the effort. It's easier to work out at the gym, people say," which explains the extremely low price of this magic ore. He threw the stone into the desk drawer and fell face first into the pillow. MC realized the hole in the courtyard was the Black Dungeon. He thought about how much effort he'd spent and how much money he'd squandered. The protagonist remembered Katie's words again. They'll come back in their third year when spring comes, right? He remembered that conversation with KD had happened right after summer break, and 5 months had already passed. Yuma calculated, 2 more months and he'd be in his third year. He stretched his arms to the ceiling and thought, $1 million chance. Life couldn't be this easy. and he knew it, but he'd still wasted a month of his life on it. MC realized it was time to think about the future. The protagonist thought about how Rui had already decided which path to take and was working hard for it. While he was, Yuma became upset and tried to convince himself Rui had nothing to do with it at all, and to each their own. He decided that he would live at his own pace and would simply try his best and forget about slime and magic ore. Yuma woke up the next morning to the sound of a dog barking. He went outside and asked Mamezu what was wrong. The protagonist told him he didn't have to bark anymore since he'd filled the hole yesterday. They approached the pit and saw it again. Yuma looked in surprise. What? He saw that slime had also returned, even though he just filled it and it returned again the next day? The protagonist thought it was all pointless and he was fed up and tired. Yuma reached out to the dog and asked if it would stop barking at slime. MC picked it up and carried it inside the house. They settled comfortably on the couch. Mama saw them sitting there and asked what they were doing there, since they were disturbing the neighbors. The protagonist wondered why he had continued. He returned to his room and tried to stop crying. Yuma muttered that he knew this would happen and should have told them right away, but now was the time, as he didn't want to be scolded. The protagonist turned the stone over in his hands and thought about the magic ore. He angrily blamed the ore for everything, and that if it were a magic stone instead of ore, everything would be different. Yuma wondered, if he couldn't sell it, maybe he could use it himself? The protagonist went online to look up how to use a magic stone and watched a video. Using a magic stone or ore is very simple. Just swallow it, after which the body will absorb it and it will become magic. Be sure to disinfect it before use. He also saw that they contain mana, and those who lack mana will not be able to absorb the stone, so he would need to check their mana before using it. Yuma also read online that to use magic from absorbing magic ore, mana is required. Electromagnetic waves generated by killing monsters are also required, and a person's mana can be measured with a special device. He quietly muttered, he's already killed a lot of steel slimes, so his mana should be enough, right? Yuma remembered that mana meters can be bought at electronics stores. The protagonist quickly ran out and bought a mana meter. It looks like a hairdryer. Yuma spent the rest of his allowance, but he was able to find a used one for less. So he was lucky. He held the meter out in front of him and said with a smile, so, magic ore with an incredibly rare steel slime, show him your power. The protagonist took aim, pressed the button several times, but nothing happened. Yuma thought. Silence. MC returned to the store and told the clerk that the mana meter he had just bought was broken. The clerk apologized and said he would check it right away. He returned 5 minutes later and reported that he hadn't found any problems. The salesman pointed the meter at the celestial aquamarine and other stones. He showed him genuine magic stones with mana values of 1, 2, and 3. The salesman pointed to the values and added that, as far as he could see, it showed the exact value and asked what he was measuring. The protagonist paused and replied that he was measuring magic ore. The salesman replied, ore. Of course. He said he'd heard that magic ore has a very low mana value. Yuma inquired, so low that it doesn't even show it? The protagonist replied, no, wait a minute. He explained that he tried measuring his own mana value and it also showed 0. Is his mana value that low too? MC smiled and explained that he'd killed over 100 monsters, including a rather powerful slime. The salesman glanced at him and said there seemed to be a misunderstanding. He explained that people only absorb a portion of the mana of the monster they kill. For example, killing a monster with a mana value of 100 increases its value by 1. So no matter how many slimes they kill, it's normal for their mana not to increase. The protagonist, with tears in his eyes, left the store and looked at a screaming bird flying in the sky. He thought about his money. Yuma sat down on the swing and thought, it can't be. MC realized he couldn't just give up after killing so many monsters. Could it really be that he'd killed 0? The protagonist thought with fear. If he just swallowed the magic ore without checking, he will have to squeeze out a 2-centimeter steel stone from himself. He saw a piece of paper fly at his leg. Yuma took it and wondered what kind of trash was this? Some kind of flyer? MC read the ad on the paper. Let's hang out together in the blue dungeon. Free and accurate mana determination. The protagonist's face began to glow with happiness and he realized, this is it. He'd arrived at the right place, glanced at the wall, and thought, behind this wall, right? Yuma went to the reception and asked for a ticket to the first floor. The hostess told him the price, 1,000 yen. He saw a large sign that said, mana measurement room. The protagonist knew for sure that the mana meter was here. Yuma sat down on the couch, waiting his turn, hoping that this meter was more accurate than that second-rate hairdryer, and that the money he'd spent on the spray and hairdryer shouldn't have been wasted. The girl invited him to the machine and ran a test. The protagonist thought, killing steel slimes for 6 months must be worth something. He picked up the test results and saw that they were all zeros. Yuma silently glanced at the sheet and turned to the doctor. The doctor informed him with a smile that his mana was 0, as their device measured to an accuracy of 0.01, so there couldn't be any error. The protagonist silently turned and headed for the exit. The doctor laughed and remarked that the boy had decided he had mana. The second doctor noted with displeasure that there were a lot of them lately. Newbies who thought they could raise their mana by killing low-level monsters, and no matter how many they killed in the blue dungeon, it wouldn't raise their mana. The second doctor smiled and said he didn't want to say this to their faces and upset them. His expression changed abruptly, and he saw the measuring device. The device began rapidly spitting out paper. The doctors looked at it in bewilderment, wondering if it had broken. The doctor remarked that he hadn't seen anything like that before. Another asked them not to make fun of him, and replied, "This machine costs millions. Does he think it can just break?" Yuma realized with tears in his eyes that he could look at the results as much as he wanted, but they were still nothing. Rubbish. He glanced at the results again and exhaled heavily. His dream had been short-lived. MC realized that 6 months of effort had been wasted. It was pointless. What the hell? Yuma glanced at the sign, a blue dungeon. He remembered that his goal was to measure his mana, but he'd completely forgotten that there was also a blue dungeon here. He'd spent a lot of effort getting here, and he figured, why not take a look? The protagonist saw a beautiful girl loudly announcing that this was the entrance to the blue dungeon, and that if they were going inside, they needed to make sure they were ready. He thought in surprise, ready? This was just a bigger version of the hole in his yard. What was there to prepare for? MC walked closer and gaped in surprise. He saw a huge hole in front of him. The protagonist noticed how huge it was and wondered if dungeons were that big. The worker saw him and asked with a smile if this was his first time here. Yuma turned around and said, "What?" "Yeah." She asked if she could see his ticket. The protagonist handed her the ticket and replied, "Of course, here." The employee inquired, "Is this the first floor?" She added, "There's no danger there, so don't worry." The employee smiled and asked, "By the way, did he bring any weapons to fight monsters?" Yuma looked at her in surprise and asked, "A weapon?" MC remembered when he went to buy a meter, there was a rack with stun guns and batons. The protagonist informed the employee, "No, I didn't." She smiled, pointed to the rental area for weapons to fight monsters, and informed him that in that case, he could borrow whatever he liked. Yuma quietly asked, "Is that really possible?" The employee asked, "Just remember to return it on the way out," and asked, "Is everything clear?" The girl informed him that the user agreement required him to provide his name, address, and phone number. The protagonist exhaled heavily and agreed. He pulled a hammer out of his pocket and realized he was already accustomed to using one and felt comfortable with it. MC descended the stairs and noted how long they were, and that an elevator would be really helpful. Yuma stepped out onto the road and thought, that seems better now. The protagonist approached the entrance to the first floor and walked through the doors. He looked up with a surprised expression and began to examine the buildings. Yuma glanced at the sky and thought he'd already descended so far and still saw light. This place can't be called well lit. MC glanced at the people and realized the main reason for the lack of darkness was that there were a lot of people here, as this was something of a tourist route. The protagonist noticed everyone had come here in a group, and he was the only one here alone. He saw that everyone was looking for monsters. Yuma thought he'd come all this way and would like to fight the monsters. But could there really be any more here, with so many people? He walked a little further and saw a small slime off to the side. The protagonist walked closer and thought, is this just an ordinary slime? The slime turned and crawled in the other direction. Yuma noted how slow it was, while the slime in his pit was jumping around like crazy. He glanced at the hammer and hit the slime lightly, causing the monster to burst and fly apart. The protagonist wondered, was the slime really that weak? He remembered, in his yard, it was 100 times stronger, and at this rate, he'd never be able to raise his mana. MC lowered his head and wondered what the point of suffering for 6 months had been. Yuma remembered the doctor's words with sadness on his face. The protagonist went outside and thought, well, no magic stones this time either, as expected. He dusted himself off and thought, he found and killed 6 more slimes, but they didn't drop anything, so it was all for nothing. MC heard a girl nearby rejoice at receiving a blue magic stone. The girl's father patted her head and said, excellent, a celestial aquamarine, about 0.2 carats. He looked at the stone and added that it could be sold for around 2,000 yen. The girl told her father, no way. She wanted to learn magic and use it herself. Her father asked, but magic can only be used in a dungeon, right? The girl nodded, approvingly. The protagonist glanced at them and wondered if he was really at the level of an elementary school student. He pulled the research results from his pocket, glanced at them, and noted, no, he's even lower than that, and no matter how many slimes he defeats, he still won't be able to use magic, right? Meanwhile, at the International Dungeon Research Organization, the scientist saw Clark and noticed just in time. He handed him a folder and asked him to pass it on to Ethan. Clark said he didn't mind and added, is he sure it should be him? The scientist apologized for saying such a thing, but he doesn't really like Ethan because he's strange, rude, and often judges things by how interesting they are. Clark exhaled heavily and added, however, Ethan is an outstanding scientist, having discovered mana for the first time, and he's sure his expertise will be needed this time too. The scientist turned around and said he should take a look too, and he was counting on him. Clark silently opened the folder and saw it. He took it to Ethan. Ethan, a cup of tea in hand, double-checked everything and understood there was no doubt. Clark folded his arms and said, "Then." Ethan agreed with him. He glanced at the paper and saw that mana was leaking from the dungeons, and more importantly, its amount was constantly increasing. Ethan took a sip and explained that the reason the monsters weren't coming to the surface was because there was no mana above. In other words, if the mana leak continued, it would be just a matter of time before monsters appeared on the surface. Clark thought, maybe that's true, but he didn't think it was time to start panicking. He reached for the folder and said, "How can you be so careless?" Ethan handed him the folder and added, the increase in density was still insignificant. Although he'd said monsters would surface, it would initially be only low-level monsters, and there would be no immediate danger. Ethan asked him not to lose his composure, as that would narrow his horizons and thinking. Even if there were no problems now, he needed to calmly work out a solution for the future. Clark glanced at the folder and said, perhaps he was right. He noted that if he said so, it must be so. Ethan replied, indeed, and asked him to look at page 8 of the report for something even more important. Clark was surprised and realized that, judging by the report, mana density on the upper levels was gradually increasing, and if that was true, then monsters from the lower levels would be heading upward. He didn't think it was possible to remain calm in such a situation, but surprisingly, he relaxed a little. Ethan said with a smile, "Great, no matter how you look at it, there's nothing to worry about yet, right?" He explained that there were other, more pressing issues at the moment. Clark asked, confused, what other problems? Ethan put down his cup and asked if he understood what mana leaking to the surface meant. He added, it means magic will be usable in the dungeon. The protagonist sat at his desk that night, silently staring at the stone. He moved it from side to side, wondering what to do. MC realized that from summer vacation until now he had been defeating the steel slime, day after day without a break, and it took him 181 days for the magic ore to drop. The protagonist decided that even if it had a trash effect, and a trash price, even if he didn't have enough mana to use it, he still wanted to use it to celebrate. MC, with a smile on his face, felt an irrepressible curiosity. Yuma realized the problem was that if there was even a little more mana, he wouldn't be able to use it. He looked online, and even though it said the ore had 0 mana, and the mana meter said it had 0 or even less than 0.1, that didn't mean it wasn't there at all. The protagonist realized it would be a good idea to measure it with the Blue Dungeon's measurement device. MC knew it would be easier to test the ore by simply eating it, but if he couldn't use it, its exit through the other side would cause quite a bit of discomfort. He picked up his phone and asked the internet to save him. The protagonist learned the necessary information and said that the normal size of human feces is 3 to 4 centimeters. Yuma thought deeply, unable to decide. He realized, so even a 2-centimeter piece should pass without any problems. MC took the detergent and began spraying it on the stone. He wondered if he was disinfecting it properly. Yuma opened the refrigerator and took out some tea. He glanced at the stone and decided, what the heck? The protagonist popped the stone into his mouth and washed it down with tea. MC calmly swallowed the stone and noticed that he didn't feel anything special. Yuma released a stream of light from his chest and tossed the bottle aside. He realized the effect was delayed, but his stomach felt warm. Had he really managed to swallow it? The protagonist remembered that magic ore was supposed to increase physical stats. The effect was weak, but this was his only chance to gain hidden power. He wondered if he'd gain some cool abilities. MC went outside and started trying out different attacks and spell names. The protagonist, smiling, wiped his sweat and realized there was no change. He walked toward home and realized that, come to think of it, magic could only be used in dungeons, so for now he should be glad he'd swallowed it. Yuma saw his dog and was overjoyed. Mamezu started barking loudly at him. The protagonist started waving his arms and didn't understand what was wrong. He just decided to take a walk in the yard and check if anything had changed. MC asked him not to get angry and tried to calm the dog down. He petted the dog and said, there's no need to make so much noise. He only barks at slime and when he's hungry. The protagonist looked at his changed hands and wondered, what? Yuma ran toward the house, confused. His mother asked him why Mamezu was barking again. She asked what they were doing. He entered his room and looked in the mirror, perplexed. The protagonist wondered if he'd turned into steel. He wondered if this was the magic ore's ability. MC looked at his hand in surprise and saw that it was completely black and sharp. Yuma reasoned, the ore had turned his entire body into steel, but shouldn't magic only work underground? He looked down at his pants and saw the same thing. The protagonist wondered, is there magic that works on the surface too? What kind of magic is this anyway? A question popped into his head. Will he ever be able to return to normal? He refused to believe what was happening to him. It all seemed like a nightmare to the protagonist. He hoped he wouldn't have to stay like this forever. He couldn't believe it and begged for it all to go back to normal, as he looked like a nightmare. MC screamed loudly, turn me back. He sat down on the couch and sadly realized he couldn't return to normal. He thought about what to do with tears in his eyes and blamed the steel slime for everything. The protagonist looked at his hand and the hammer on the table. Without thinking, he hit himself on the hand with the hammer. The metal clanged. Then, Yuma realized he wasn't in any pain and was as durable as a steel slime. The protagonist glanced at the canister of gas and snow, first frying his hand, then cooling it with the spray. Then he realized he was just as vulnerable to fire and cold as a slime. 5 minutes later, MC returned to normal and was overjoyed. He reasoned. He was a little surprised, but nothing terrible had happened, and it was even funny. A question popped into his head. Could it be that he would never transform again, and that this was the end? The next day, Yuma woke up full of ambition, repeating the same thing over and over again like a mantra. Harden. And then his body became like a steel slime again. He was glad he had succeeded. MC recalled the test results. He had eaten the ore without expecting anything, as he had taken the test without preparation, and even despite having 0 mana, he still gained the ability, the power of magic ore. And so, 5 minutes later, he returned to normal, just like yesterday. He realized it was turning off automatically. MC cried out, "One more time, harden," but he couldn't transform anymore. Then he thought he could only use it once a day. Yuma was delighted and thought, if he goes to the lower levels with this, his steel fists will help him kick some monsters to be useful in the dungeons. MC fantasized. He can become like that rich streamer he recently watched, although he wasn't particularly interested in that. In a video about monsters in the depths of dungeons, the blogger reasoned that physical attacks are almost ineffective against monsters. Their durable bodies can withstand even bullets and explosions. Magic that can defeat them is highly prized, as the dungeons contain a wide variety of monsters with magic. Fire dragons, wind birds, lightning demons, frost spirits. The only thing that can counter their magic is other magic. MC finished watching the video and realized he was vulnerable to fire and cold, and he only dealt physical damage. This meant he was still useless and couldn't think of a use for his ability. The protagonist spent the entire day obsessing over the future and how he was doing nothing to achieve it, only envying successful people. He recalled the day he applied to his miserable university with its low requirements. Yuma decided that killing slimes was a waste of time. The protagonist continued doing it as a morning workout. MC considered himself idle every day, and yet a year had already passed since he discovered the steel slime. The adventurers were in a red dungeon when a fire dragon attacked them. Their desperate cries could be heard from everywhere, and they found themselves trapped in flames. The dragon prepared to attack the poor girl with a flaming volley. Rui immediately covered the girl with his cloak and charged at the blade-wielding monster. He felled it in seconds. The nearby adventurers were shocked by what they saw and ran to the hero, asking about his condition. Rui asked the girl if she was okay and offered her a helping hand. He tried to calm her down and said, the cloak he brought with him to the trial was fireproof. The adventurer scratched his head and asked about the hero's condition and what his name was. He then showed his badge and introduced himself. His name was Amasawa Rui, and that he was a third-year high school student. Early in the morning, Rui was waiting in the office. He turned his head and saw the dungeon trial supervisor. The supervisor introduced himself as Ishikawa and that he was from the Elcid Corporation. The supervisor thanked him for saving his subordinates. Rui casually replied that he was simply glad they were safe. Ishikawa noticed that Rui acted with precision and speed during the fight, as if he was planning to strike at weak points, as he struck the monster's vital points on the side and neck with a precise blow. Masawa-kun replied that he had studied the dungeon monsters thoroughly before facing them. Ishikawa was surprised by this and asked him to extend his hand. He handed him the box containing the magical stone that had fallen from the salamander, calling it the Silver Scarlet Ruby. Since he had defeated the salamander, the stone was now his. The curator also added that this beauty was worth nearly 14 million yen on the market. Rui was shocked by this information and refused to accept something so valuable, but the curator stopped him, saying that the rules clearly stated that whoever slays the monster keeps the prize. Ishikawa's instinct told him that Rui would need this stone in the future, and he asked him to accept the trophy. On the morning of December 12th, a sleepy Yuma had no desire to go to school. He muttered angrily under his breath. He didn't care about celebrities. Who cared anyway? But then the dungeon news caught his attention. Recently, a large company, Elcid, held a test in the dungeon, during which on the top floor, adventurers encountered a salamander, although they usually reside on the 10th floor and below. MC was surprised by the news, as monsters from the 10th floor and below are supposed to be very strong. He heard in the sequel that a high school student had saved the injured girl. He looked at the screen and saw the headline, Amasawa Rui killed the monster. It was like a bolt from the blue for Yuma. He stood in the hallway, dumbfounded by what he saw. A crowd of reporters had gathered outside the school to interview the brave high school student, Amasawa Rui. A reporter asked Rui, was he scared of the monster? To which he replied that he was too caught up in the battle at the time and wasn't intimidated. She added that even the Elcid Corporation seekers were surprised by this. Rui said it all worked out thanks to the rental weapons. The reporter asked Rui about the magic stone. Does he plan to sell it, given its value is over 14 million? He replied that he would use it for his own purposes, as he plans to become a seeker in the future. Yuma watched enviously, thoughts of the stone's value and his future swirling in his head. The director said that Amasawa-kun could attend any prestigious university, given his talents and high grades, which Elcid also recognized. Yuma asked Kade who Elcid was. She told him it was the largest dungeon corporation in Japan, and that Rui wanted to go there more than anything. To get into Elcid, Rui would have to enroll in a national institution after graduating, a seeker training institution, the STI. Yuma hesitantly asked, what is a national institution. Kade turned away from him and asked Yuma, does he really not know anything? To which he awkwardly replied that they weren't telling him anything. Kade frustratedly reminded him that he himself had said it didn't interest him, didn't concern him, and didn't want to know anything. She told him she would join STI with Rui after graduation. Yuma was perplexed. Kade explained that she wanted to become a messiah, a profession only for people with healing magic from white magic stones. Yuma was shocked, saying it was more difficult than becoming a seeker, and that she wouldn't be able to do it. But she was confident in her decision and said that a man from Elcid had already tested her and told her she had potential. She believed she had found her dream and was determined to pursue it with all her might. Kade turned and left, and Yuma remained standing, thinking about his dream and the future. MC reasoned that Rui was his childhood friend, whom he somehow considered a rival, and Kade was the one he would always be with. He didn't even notice how they had found their purpose in life and were working hard for it. And while they were pursuing their dreams, what was Yuma doing? He was angry with himself inside and didn't understand what to do. Why didn't he want anything he was interested in? He frowned and thought he had to do something. He began investigating. The first detail that caught his attention was the difference in knowledge between himself, Kade, and Rui. To catch up, he would have to study hard. He picked up books, but after a while he grew bored and fell face first into the pillow. MC languidly said, hopeless. He asked his dog, does Mamazu think his master is capable of anything? The dog looked at him, perplexed. But Yuma continued the silent dialogue. He feels lost and has not been able to come up with a purpose in life. He does not know what to do and where to go. He has no motivation. The dog looked at its owner as if understanding his feelings and empathizing. It was as if the protagonist was weighing Kade and Rui on a scale. On one side was Rui, his childhood friend, a handsome man with great hair, a universal favorite, an excellent student, and a long-legged athlete whose victory over Salamander had made the news. He would become a seeker in the future. On the other side was Kade, his other childhood friend. She joked with him, was loud but still a good girl, and had recently become more feminine, which surprised him. Raised by a single mother, Kade has dreamed of helping people all her life, even considering becoming a nurse, but now wants to be the Messiah. Rui and Kade aspire to become a seeker and the Messiah, respectively. Yuma was confident they were capable of achieving both goals. Then he realized that all this would make people envious, and once they achieved status, that envy would only grow. Yuma watches Kade and Rui strive for their dreams and realizes he's incapable of seeing what makes people envy them and makes them shine. If only he had a goal to strive for. Mamezu licked his master's palm. Yuma felt his encouragement and told him he was right and he just needed to keep going. From then on, the protagonist managed to mine 2 more pieces of magic ore. After absorbing them, the steel form's duration increased to 15 minutes, still a useless improvement. Yuma stood by the cave saying, he just needed to keep defeating slimes like usual. Suddenly, he saw a shining golden slime emerging from the cave. MC began using gas and freeze canisters against it, but it bounced back and forth, unfazed by his attacks. He realized this slime wasn't like before, but something new, and he would definitely defeat it. Yuma poured both canisters into the slime at the same time and realized that he had overdone it, but he still won. He struck a victory pose when a pebble of golden magic ore flew at him. He started searching for information about it and the Black Dungeon online when he got home, but found nothing. Then he checked it on a mana meter, which gave him zeros. Yuma still hoped to use it, even though it wasn't a magic stone yet. But first, he decided to try selling it, since it looked like gold. He called a precious metals exchange and asked if they could appraise his piece of gold, to which they asked, a gold purity seal, a sales history, and a gold certificate. Yuma was surprised, since he hadn't received anything like that when he dealt with the slime, other than the ore. He asked if it was legal for a miner to handle such things, to which they replied, no. The protagonist ate a pebble and wondered what it would do if it turned golden and shiny. He said, harden, and turned steely as usual. Had anything changed at all? On the 5th day of mining ore in the cave, Yuma was surprised by the frequency of ore drops from slime. For the first time in the past year, he had dropped magic ore for the 5th day in a row. The previous time, he had only dropped 3 pieces. Then it occurred to him that the golden magic ore had improved his luck and raised his chance of getting one to 100%. He wondered if this would work with magic stones. Was he really in for a reward for his efforts? Yuma headed to the blue dungeon to test his luck with a regular slime, and he was inspired. When he returned home, he collapsed on his bed, having not found a single magic stone. MC thought, apparently, this only works with ore. After that, he received another 14 pieces of ore, dropping every day. Yuma was surprised that the drop rate was as frequent as chicken eggs, and that he was still going to use it. After absorbing all that ore, its maximum duration increased to 70 minutes. He wondered why there weren't any other buffs. This was driving him hysterical. But suddenly, a red slime appeared. Yuma was shocked by what he saw and didn't expect slime to come in such different forms. Slime signaled to Yuma that it was ready to fight him, surprising him. But he quickly transformed his body into solid steel and said he didn't really like this form because it tore his clothes. But if it wanted a fight, it would get one. He tensed his chest and slime bounced off him. Physical attacks were useless against him. He used his burner on it, But it turned out that the red slime was immune to fire. Yuma didn't know what to do and went online with the question, how to weaken steel? He received the answer that he needed to use a cleaning agent, which would cause rust to spread across the steel, causing destruction. He prepared thoroughly, moved Mamezu to a safe place, donned a mask and rubber gloves, and grabbed a bucket and some acid-based cleaning agent. Yuma added the agent to the bucket and froze it, making sure the slime couldn't move before adding it. He gently stirred the bucket's contents a dozen times. When the slime was covered in rust, he used both cans against it, freezing and heating it. Finally, Yuma struck a victory pose. The next day, a new slime with immunity to cold awaited him. He realized he couldn't freeze it. It would be difficult to slow it down. Then the protagonist approached it again thoroughly. He moved Mamezu to a safe place, poured water around the pit, grabbed a lighter and a newspaper and kerosene. MC simply burned the entire hole to hell and struck a victory pose. Over the next few days, various colored slimes came to him, and he successfully defeated them. He received 4 colored pieces of magic ore and wondered what was happening to the chance. It occurred to him that the chance of colored slimes appearing had increased to 100% due to mining gold magic ore. Yuma swallowed all the pieces of ore, since he couldn't sell it anyway, and washed it down with water. He decided to test the waters, taking off his clothes so as not to tear them, and transformed into a completely different form than before. Spikes of colored ore protruded from him. He was terrified by these changes, but he was reassured that after some time, he would return to his normal form. Yuma went online again, wondering if this ore had any effects. The information stated that the white dungeon created white or transparent magic stones with the power of healing magic. The red dungeon created red magic stones with the power of fire magic. The blue dungeon created blue magic stones with the power of water magic. The black dungeon created magic stones that can strengthen the owner's body. The green dungeon created green magic stones with the power of wind magic, and the yellow dungeon created yellow magic stones with the power of lightning magic. Yuma realized that the ore matched the color of the magic stones, meaning it had the same attributes as the dungeon. He doubted he could use magic, but first, he tested the fire and ice sprays on himself. He felt neither hot nor cold. The red ore gave him protection from fire, and the blue from cold. Accordingly, the yellow ore should give him protection from lightning, and the green from wind. But how could he test all this? He gained protection from all offensive types of magic, but he still hadn't found a dream or purpose in life. No matter how long he could remain steel or what elements he protected himself from, he couldn't use it in everyday life. Yuma was still glad he could improve his abilities. 5 minutes later, he returned to normal and decided to get dressed. He lay on his bed, fantasizing. He already had a red, blue, yellow, and green stone. Perhaps a white one would be next? It sounded rather strange in his head. Would white give him protection from healing? Yuma fell asleep, eagerly anticipating the appearance of some strange slime the following day. The next day, a huge black slime was waiting for him in the cave. The protagonist wasn't happy with its color. Let's go back a bit. 2 weeks to the day, Yuma defeated the Golden Slime, the International Dungeon Research Organization. Ethan said the other investigators were making a fuss, and he was curious. It seemed they had defeated a Duke-ranked beast. He said that so far, 2 Dukes and 1 Lord-ranked beast had been defeated. Now, the 3rd Duke had been defeated. 3 years had passed since the last victory over a unique monster, so it's no wonder there was a fuss. The Orpheus Stone Tablet appeared. This is a tablet discovered in the middle levels of the White Orpheus Dungeon. It shows special monsters and their power levels. These monsters are divided into 6 kings at the very top, followed by 12 lords and 24 dukes. Researchers call these monsters unique because the gemstone tablet cracks when the monster is defeated. Research organizations consider this tablet incredibly important. The assistant said that the fact that the black gem had cracked this time was the most surprising thing. A search was currently underway for those responsible in all countries of the world. Whoever defeated the Duke must be incredibly powerful. Ethan said that the countries with large black dungeons were probably India, Russia, Australia, and Brazil. He said it seemed like Japan had one too, but his research hadn't progressed very far, so it was unlikely that this was it. Ethan said that diving into a black dungeon isn't profitable, so it's not worth the risk. There are brave men in the world, right? And it's time to return to the present. Yuma thought, wow, how huge. For the first time, he felt relief that it couldn't escape from his hole. They're usually the size of a ball. A steel slime is usually about 15 centimeters, and that's the size of an exercise ball. The enormous steel slime today was almost 75 centimeters. Yuma wondered if he could defeat such a monster. No, he couldn't give up. If he can defeat such a huge slime, then he won't be surprised if some super rare magic ore drops from it. He still dreams of some rare ore. He said that the burners and spray are ready, and more importantly, the rest of his body is ready. He forgot to take off his clothes. Oh well, he should go ahead. The spray that MC prepared was ruined. He asked, "What is this? What happened?" He looked ahead and saw a huge monster that imitated knives. Yuma said that it doesn't cut him, and it doesn't hurt at all. Is his rest of his form stronger? And he won't scare it with its tentacle blade. After these words, imitation sledgehammer, saw, axe appeared. MC shouted in denial and said that this one needs to stop, This one needs to wait a minute. He said that won't work. Yuma tried to dodge the attacks. He shouted, "What is this? Some kind of porcupine?" He's not in pain, but his clothes are in tatters, even though it was too late when the spikes came out. He's confident the rest of his body can't lose to some slime. He still has burners and sprays left. He can fight. Yuma tried to attack the slime and yelled that this one deserves it, and that's it. 30 minutes later, MC yelled that he's had enough of the spikes. An hour later, Yuma yelled that he can't lose to this one. MC crouched down, breathing heavily, and asked, "Isn't this enough? It's never ending." He may not be in pain, but taking so many hits is annoying. He's used up all the burners and sprays. What should he do now? Yuma hit the slime with his hammer, but it flew off. MC thought, it's his hammer. He's used it every day for a year. It's part of him. His trusty hammer, minus 1,280 yen. Yuma cursed and said he'd had enough. It needed to break. MC dealt a powerful blow to the slime, and then the monster dropped ore. Yuma lay on the ground and said he was exhausted. When he got home, Mom asked MC what happened to him. He replied that he was just playing with Mamezu. She couldn't believe it. Was Mamezu the one who tore his clothes like that? Yuma looked at the ore and said that at first glance, it looked like regular magic ore, but this one had some kind of floral pattern on it. He defeated such a powerful monster. Surely his mana had increased at least a little. And what about the special magic ore? MC said that if there was even a little mana in it, he could sell it instead of using it on him. But since he could use it, he had no choice but to swallow this thing too. Yuma's curiosity was piqued. He swallowed it and washed it down. Then he said that his stomach was getting warmer. He was already starting to get used to it. And then MC felt sick, and he thought that it was much hotter than before. Maybe he shouldn't have eaten this thing. It was too late. Yuma said that it seemed to have calmed down, but he was already scared. This feeling, maybe something in it will change again. Even more spikes? MC raised his hand up and said with a smile that then he should try. This should harden. Yuma shouted that he forgot to take off his clothes again. He would tear all his clothes again. The next moment, a black slime enveloped MC and he changed his form. He was surprised and said that this form looked powerful, like a villain from a superhero movie. And he also grew. He was much taller than he was. With his new powerful form, maybe he also got abilities, like that steel slime. For example, blade tentacles. They looked very scary. Maybe he can do that too? Yuma tried using the same techniques he'd seen earlier. He said he could change his body with his imagination. It was so cool. Can he do anything else? He called Mamezu and said he should see what he could do. MC said he snuck in to show him his new form. It's okay, it's him, Yuma. Then MC saw his reflection in the glass door and thought he looked like a monster. It was scary. He decided to ignore his inner voice for now. Meanwhile, while Yuma was fighting the giant slime, there was an emergency meeting of the chief researchers at the International Dungeon Exploration Organization. She said that, as they must know, something serious and unprecedented had happened regarding the anomalous events related to the Orpheus tablet, which had been occurring for the 4th day in a row. Maya said that the Black Duke had been defeated for the first time in 3 years, 2 weeks ago. But what's even more incredible is that 4 lords in a row had been defeated immediately after that. Chairman Maya Berger, Israel. James said that more importantly, they did not receive any information. Could some country have conducted a large-scale study of the dungeons? Physicist James Bright, USA. Biologist Li Haoran, China. Haoran said that they also think that their country is covering it up. They should not make groundless accusations. Ahmad said that the red, blue, yellow, and green gems cracked every day, which means that 4 dungeons were cleared at once. Who and why could have done such a thing? Archaeologist Ahmad Tahir, Egypt. He said that he does not know the reason, but if someone is capable of such a thing, it is either the USA or China. But since the USA did not do it, only China remains. He said that concealing information is an American specialty, isn't it? He told him. How dare he? Physicist Ethan Noble, Australia. Ethan said that to enter 4 dungeons simultaneously, go deep and clear them would require a huge number of adventurers. Is that really possible? He said that when the Lord was defeated last time in America, it took 15 adventurers, including Flame Emperor Albert, the world's strongest adventurer. And even then, there were 7 victims. They met the Lord at the 100th floor. It's impossible to do that in 4 places at once. James asked then, why did the gems on the tablet crack? There was no explanation. Ethan said, perhaps they misunderstood something from the beginning. James asked him again, was that right? He said the gems above the tablets were arranged by color. They assumed the monsters corresponded to the dungeon's color. And in fact, the already defeated dukes and lords did indeed have gem colors that matched theirs. But the red, blue, yellow, and green lords defeated this time. Could they have been in the same dungeon? Considering the black gem cracked 2 weeks ago, someone is probably currently protecting the black dungeon. Black dungeons are the least explored and very mysterious. No country allows entry into black dungeons without permission. He said this only applies to discovered dungeons. There may be others that have never been reported. Maya said that if what he said was true, who were these adventurers who could reach the 100th floor? All the best adventurers are controlled by countries and militaries. Ethan said it was possible that there were adventurers unknown to them, and that these people defeated the Duke in a new and unknown black dungeon, after which they defeated 4 lords one after another. Although this is just a guess, it is the only explanation. These adventurers have already defeated 4 lords. They, or he, are now one of the strongest adventurers in the entire world. James said it was ridiculous for such a person to exist. Suddenly he apologized for interrupting the meeting and said that he had urgent news. Ethan said his theory appeared to be close to the truth. One of the 6 kings, the Black King, was defeated. MC said in surprise that that big slime was strong, much stronger than the colored ones. Well, at least he got stronger. Yuma asked what he should do. The huge slime he defeated yesterday ate all his stash of burners and sprays. He forgot to go to the store. He didn't have enough for today's steel slime. Some weird one might show up again, so he needed to come up with a plan. He walked up to the dog and wished it good morning. He asked it, "It's full of energy, right?" It barked every morning, sensing the slime. "It's been doing this for a year." What? Where did the hole go? Was it because he defeated the huge slime? Was it really the boss? He fell to his knees and said, he tried to fill the hole so many times, but every day it reappeared, and now there's no trace of it. Seriously? It disappeared so quickly? Well, at least he doesn't have to get up every morning anymore, and Mamezu is clearly happy that the hole is gone. Right. Everything is great, right? He's free. Yuma changed his clothes and had breakfast. Now that there's no longer a hole in the yard, life will be calmer. He doesn't have to rush to school anymore. He can eat breakfast in peace. MC was on his way to school and said that he would have more pocket money and fewer expenses, and his clothes won't get torn. He didn't earn anything from it anyway, and he doesn't want anyone to praise him at all. And even though that hole was nothing but trouble and he wanted it to go away, somehow he still feels a sense of loss. Kade wished Yuma good morning. MC said it was her. Then he wished her good morning. She told him that he was early today. She heard that he was really late yesterday. Went to bed so late that he didn't get enough sleep or something. Yuma answered negatively. She asked him, "Really?" In any case, at least once he was early. That made her happy. MC thought that he couldn't tell her that he was fighting a slime, and that's why he was late. He told her that he just overslept yesterday. That's all. She agreed with him and said, as he said. Yuma thought, right, the dungeon is gone, and he won't be late anymore. He said that she didn't have to worry about his lateness anymore. She looked at him in surprise. Night had fallen. MC said that, on the advice of close people, he took the entrance exams to the university, where he only had to submit his documents, and he was accepted. Student life awaits him in the spring. Is he really ready to continue living like this? He thought that until now he hadn't really wanted anything, and he had no dreams. Therefore, he hadn't been very interested in anything, because his interest had always been superficial. That's how he sees himself, a dull, unmotivated individual. He knew it, but he kept bluffing, which only made him even more despondent. Yuma pulled out his phone and said his search history was full of dungeon-related queries. He thought he'd spent an entire year on that tiny dungeon in his yard, going there every day. He had no real reason, but he still tried his best. He never thought he'd pursue such an unrealistic dream. In the past, he would have looked at it cynically and thought it had nothing to do with him. But now he could say with complete certainty that he wanted to become a dungeon adventurer. MC said that this was it, the place where Kade and Rui had decided to build their careers. STI is an adventurer training institute, located in the semi-government Sector 3. It was founded 2 years ago, and this year will be its 3rd term. Students are recruited twice a year, for the 1st and 2nd semesters, respectively. It was the first place in Japan to successfully capture monsters. It also serves as a research center and conducts monster and dungeon research on a daily basis, including developing cages, chambers, and artificial dungeons using magic stones. Yuma said the institute exists to find and develop talents with a 6-month program, midterm exams every 2 months, and those who fail are expelled, and they are strict. Oh, right. It says here that he needs to list his strengths. He should look at, firstly, the steel transformation. The power he gained from the steel slime. It should help him in his work as an adventurer. The notebook said he would become an adventurer. Steel transformation. He can take steel form for 5 minutes, maintain it for up to 10 minutes, and revert to normal every 5 minutes. Physical attacks don't work on him while he's in steel form. MC circled the text in his notebook. He's immune to all of them: water, wind, lightning, and fire. He also said he's protected from the 4 elements, so he's supposedly invulnerable in terms of defense, right? Although he doesn't know how durable he is. Secondly, he gained power from a giant slime. He can transform parts of its body into weapons. He doesn't think other adventurers can do that. At least he hasn't seen anything like it on dungeon streams. Also, he first transforms into steel, and then imagines a gel structure. And in this liquid steel form, he can penetrate narrow crevices. Could that be useful in dungeons? Are those all his strengths, I suppose? As for his weaknesses, the first one is rather problematic. He thought that if anyone saw his steel form, they would immediately realize he got this power from the Black Dungeon. In other words, they would know he'd been in the Black Dungeon without permission, and everyone would know he'd broken the law. He just checked. But entering and exiting Black Dungeon is strictly regulated, relative to dungeons of other colors for some reason. International dungeon laws, special regulations for dungeons in Tokyo. Yuma said he now knew there were a ton of laws associated with them, and breaking them was a very serious crime. Getting scolded by his mother was the least of his problems. He did whatever he wanted, but not a single living soul could know about it. MC was terrified. He said his second weakness was that he couldn't use magic. His mana was still at 0. The notebook says no matter how powerful his other form, he can't defeat the monsters in the depths of the dungeon without magic. He said he has no choice. He needs to somehow boost his mana and learn magic. And his third weakness, right, is the biggest problem. It's absolutely necessary. To become a professional adventurer, he needs to join an organization with permission to enter dungeons. Ordinary people are generally forbidden from entering the deepest floors of dungeons. Only corporations and groups with government permission can do so. Even famous people aren't exempted, and they must be part of an organization. Yuma said that in that case, he should find a job with a corporation during the winter. Or isn't that why he wants to join the Adventurer Institute? He can't believe he only realized this after the entrance exam. So what should he do now? MC thought for a moment and said that Kade said the STI entrance exams were postponed. He remembered her telling him the STI entrance exams were later. Yuma asked her, "Really?" MC looked at his phone and said that in addition to the entrance exam date, they were also accepting applications. Yuma tried to call her. She looked at him, and he said that she finally noticed him. She should come over. She said that this was something new. He rarely visits her class? Why did he come? He said that it was this. He had a favor to ask her. She asked him what, a favor? MC hesitated, but eventually that he wanted her to help him with his studies. She asked in surprise. What? They had been friends since childhood, for 18 years, but he had never asked her for such a thing. Unbelievable. He really was Yuma. She asked him why such a change. He had already been accepted into a university, hadn't he? MC said that he seemed to have gotten into one, but he wanted to learn more about dungeons. She asked him what, dungeons, why? Yuma said that STI had extended the application period. She asked what that meant. Was he interested in STI? Was that true? Was he sure? He wasn't trying to make fun of her, was he? He'd said she'd never become the Messiah. MC fell to his knees in front of her and begged her to forgive him. She said it was good that he'd repented, but it was still a bit unexpected. Yuma looked up at her and said he'd been thinking about things a lot since then, and he was genuinely interested, so he wanted to give it his all. He was serious. Or was it too late? She sat down next to him and said it was never too late to try. But that didn't change the fact that there was almost no time left before the entrance exam. However, STI was more concerned with aptitude testing than theory, so if he studied until he dropped, his chances of passing all the tests might be better than 0. Since he asked for it himself, he wouldn't complain, right? So, is he ready for the challenge? MC looked at her and blushed. He responded positively and said he would give it his all. She told him he should get ready, that from today on she was going to cram everything he needed to know into his head. Yuma studied diligently with her help the rest of the day. 3 days left. Setagaya, Tokyo, STI, Seeker Training Institute, main building. Katie said the Messiah exam would be in the second tower, and he would be in the 4th, right? They needed to work hard. MC agreed with her. She said, Rui should be nearby too. Were he sure he didn't want to tell him? Yuma cowered and said there was no need. He wouldn't tell him anything until he passed the exam, and neither would she. She said, well, it couldn't be helped. They'd been playing rivals since they were kids. MC said she needed to shut up. It was time for the exam. Yuma thought the theory part of the exam had been easier than he thought, all thanks to Kade's Spartan training, moving to another room after the theory. MC thought he was done, but next up was his mana measurement and the practical exam, the most important part. Unfortunately, he couldn't find much information about the practical part, and Kade knew nothing either, so he had no way to prepare. Yuma said he was curious about what would happen. She said the test would involve defeating one of the monsters kept here, after which they would test his mana levels. It looked like this time he'd have to defeat a red slime from the red dungeon. Defeating it quickly boosts his mana, making it perfect for testing. MC, surprised, said she knew a lot. She said she was just happy to meet someone close in age, that's all. She said she forgot to introduce herself. Her name was Shion, she was 18, and Yuma said he was a third year at Mitaka High School. Shion happily said that was great, so they were the same age. It turned out that the entrance exam was open to people up to 30 years old, and everyone who sat next to her in theory was older than her. In fact, she knew a thing or two about mana and the entrance exam. Their meeting could be a sign of fate, so she would share it with him while they waited in line. But just so he knew, her explanation was unlikely to help change the final result or improve his chances of passing the exams. MC asked her if that was true. Then he thanked her. He thought she knew a lot about mana. What was she? A nerd? She said that their mana values were both 0, and they should take the paper and go to the next room. Shion said that even here, the measuring device showed 0, but that was expected. There was nothing wrong with starting from scratch. What mattered wasn't how much mana he had now, but how much he could get in the future. Mana is the lifeblood of a seeker. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was absolutely necessary for the work. The more powerful the magic, the more mana it requires. A magical barrier can protect the body and even repel projectiles. So, naturally, a seeker's strength depends directly on their mana. Yuma thought that mana increases very greatly among individuals. Even defeating identical monsters will give them different amounts of mana. This is called mana growth. Small increases, large increases. As you gain mana, it will eventually reach a certain value, after which it will no longer increase. This is called the upper limit of mana. Higher, This limit also varies among individuals, and the lower it is, the more difficult it will be to become a seeker. She said they need to pierce the red slime with this knife. After defeating it, their mana levels will be measured again. They pierced the slime with the knife. Shion told him that he would find out his mana growth after defeating the red slime. MC said he understood. But what if his mana doesn't increase at all? Shion asked him. What? He doesn't need to be afraid. Everything will be fine. He can pass the exam even with a low score. Yuma asked in surprise. Is this true? Is she serious? Shion happily replied that it was true. There are people with low growth but a high upper limit. These qualities vary from person to person. MC thought, right? He spent a whole year defeating the steel slime. His tenacity must be that quality. This is no time to panic. He said he'd give it his all. He said that all adventurer candidates would now be briefed on the practical portion of the exam. They should be aware that injury is possible during the exam. They should listen carefully. In front of them was the only artificial field in Japan where the practical exam would be held. An artificial dungeon. An experimental facility that creates dungeon-like weapons used for research on dungeon-dwelling monsters and magic that requires mana. He said that behind this door was the first floor of an artificial dungeon. Once there, they needed to find a box with a ball inside. The test was very simple. They needed to bring the ball back within a certain time. However, it would also release monsters that they would need to avoid. Someone in the crowd said, "Avoid?" Attacking was prohibited. He asked, what about their weapons? He said that the key to this test was speed, the courage to complete the dungeon without being afraid of the monsters. That was what mattered most to a quester. Regardless of their abilities and equipment, it wouldn't matter in reality if they lacked the courage to use them. That's why attacking monsters and carrying weapons was prohibited during the test. This test would measure their speed at completing the test. The monsters in the test would be the same red slime they used to alter their mana. It wasn't very dangerous, but they still needed to be careful. It was time to begin the test. The examinees would be called by number. While they were sitting in line, Shion said to Yuma, "Does he see?" She said there would only be red slime on the test. It was very easy. MC agreed with her and said that it looked like that. Suddenly, they heard a scream. Yuma thought the scream was coming from the artificial dungeon. What the hell happened? Slime said they need to be careful. They are the nightmare of the artificial dungeon. An army of red slime. The children's hearts sink into their boots at the sight of them. They can't stop them because they are countless. Slime phrases from imagination. Slime said they need to run from them in terror. He shouted that he needed help. She dodged the slime and asked, "Damn, did they overdo it?" He came out of the dungeon, and then he said, 8 minutes and 30 seconds, that's fail. When Shion came out of the dungeon, he said 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Next examinee, he should go in. At that moment, it was MC's turn. When the slime saw him, it trembled with fear. Yuma asked, "Damn, he's worried. What's really going on?" Some examinees were running away screaming in fear. Others couldn't move and were saved by the staff. Shion was so confident, but she still came back pale as chalk. He should get started. MC thought, if even she was having a hard time, how was he supposed to survive? Slime was stuck to the wall in clumps. Yuma walked forward and said, "Will they let him pass?" MC passed Slime and said he'll go. "Okay, he's just passing by, right? Passing by." Yuma took the ball and thought he had it, and now they'll attack him, right? MC looked at them and said, "They're still sitting there. What happened? But it looks like there's no danger." He thought that maybe it was because they were tired from so many examinees. That's great. Shion had tired them out, and they decided to take a rest. When Yuma came out of the dungeon, he was told that 2 minutes and 28 seconds was the fastest time. Shion told him that it was great work. MC said that it was nothing special. It was all because she was in front of him. He was just lucky. She asked him what she had done. The exam was over. Shion said goodbye to him and said that they would see each other again. She hoped that they both would pass. Yuma took out his phone and saw a message from Kade. She wrote to him that the Messiah exam would last longer than she expected, so he shouldn't wait for her and he needed to go home. How did it go for him? Everything okay? MC thought that he had done everything he could. All that was left was to wait for the results. A week later, Yuma was looking at the letter very happily. It said that they congratulated him. He passed. MC was very happy. He shouted that it was awesome. Because he was screaming so loudly, his mother told him that he shouldn't be so loud. Yuma apologized to her. MC thought he had completely forgotten, but his parents still thought he would go to a regular university. He should tell them everything. Yuma called his mother. His mother replied, "Well, what else? He would soon become a student. He needed to act like an adult." MC told her that when his father returned, he needed to talk to them about something. In the spring, he wouldn't go to university. He would go to the Seeker Training Institute. His parents were shocked. She asked, "Seeker Institute? What's that?" Yuma replied that it was an institution that trained seekers, STI for short. He needed to graduate to be accepted into the Dungeon Corporation. His mother thought, her son had grown up so much. What does MC usually do through his mother's eyes? Laze around, play with Mamezu, always online. She asked him if he wanted to become a seeker. He hadn't said anything about it before. Yuma said he'd been interested in this for some time. She said interest alone wouldn't be enough. MC said he'd actually already taken the entrance exam and passed. His mother asked in surprise. What? He didn't even consult with them. And how much was the exam fee? Why didn't he ask permission? Yuma replied that the fee was small and tuition was free. However, it was a boarding school and he'd have to pay for his own living expenses and course materials. A semester lasts 6 months and midterms are held every 2 months. If he fails, he'll be expelled immediately. He apologized to them for not telling them in advance, but he was serious. He wanted to test himself, so he decided to pass the exam first and then tell them. His father said that the job of a seeker was very dangerous, right? Would he be able to handle it after graduation? He didn't know much about it, but he'd heard that people had even died in this line of work. He said he wanted to test himself, but was he willing to risk his life? MC replied that he was. He thought that the adventurer's job was to fight monsters and mine magic stones. Even the slime from the pit had torn his clothes to shreds. Of course it was dangerous. Yuma said that he understood that it wouldn't be easy. It was a hard and dangerous path, but he would be ready. He would study, and nothing would stop him. His father said that in that case, couldn't he do it after university? MC, a little scared, said that the thing was that he didn't want to do anything, and he chose the first thing that came to mind, university. And now that he found an occupation and changed his mind, he wouldn't be able to study properly at university. So, his mother looked at him with a creepy look. Yuma thought how creepy her look was, but he's always been a slacker, she wants to say. And his father thinks he's naive. How can he convince them otherwise? His father called him and told him that things like his passion, hobby, and thoughts, he'd never shared them with anyone until now. He surprised him, so he did have a purpose in life, after all. He thanked his son for telling them. MC called him over. His father said that since he had already decided everything, Yuma happily asked if that was true, and if they were okay with it. His father said, however, that he shouldn't drop out because of the university he was admitted to. He should take an academic leave. If he could graduate and become a seeker, he should tell his father, and then he would submit his withdrawal application. MC was very happy. He thanked his father and said that he wouldn't let them down. Yuma happily ran into another room. His mother said, seriously, this boy, is this a good idea? Wouldn't it be better for him to finish university normally? His father said that whether he succeeds or not depends entirely on him. Their son had chosen his path and was walking it before they knew it, and now they couldn't change his decision, even if they tried. For now, they could only support him so that he could confidently continue on his path. April 1st, Seeker Training Institute, STI, entrance ceremony. He said that the two of them needed to be faster. She said that he was too excited. MC was very happy. Rui said that he didn't know that Yuma wanted to become a seeker, and she helped him with his studies. When did they have time? Keita answered positively and said that after all, he could if he wanted. MC thought that the three of them were all together again. That's great, right? He answered positively and said that he was also happy. Perhaps they were all together again, and finally he was on the same level with them. From now on he would work together with Rui and Keita. He asked what would happen today. Keita said that they would be sorted into classes, apparently based on exam results. Keita and Rui were in first class, and Yuma was in third class. He asked, upset, what? MC said that classes at STI are divided according to grades from the entrance exam. Does that mean class 1 has the best grades? He said it seemed that way, and they in class 3 have been lagging behind from the start. He's Ryosuke Ashiya. He's turning 30 this year, and he's the oldest here. He said he's Hamanaka. He's 23. Nice to meet you. Yuma introduced himself. He's Yuma Mitaka. He's 18. Ryosuke said, surprise, that means he's the youngest. Well, regardless of age, they're all now members of the lower class. Class 3. They'll definitely be friends. MC said lower class, and Rui and Keita ended up in class 1. So what's so different about him? He thought Rui and Keita studied hard every day to make their dreams come true, and he'd previously said he had no motivation. The world was unfair, and he was a damn idiot. Of course, there's a huge difference between them. Hamanaka said that it seemed like there were a couple of students in the first class who broke the record for the highest mana growth. One of them was undoubtedly Shion Kagurazaka. Yuma asked in shock, Shion? He said that after all, she was the princess of a famous dungeon pharmaceutical corporation. She was on a completely different level from them. So, she's the young mistress of a cool corporation? And the other one, it seemed, was the upperclassman Elcid was interested in. Ryosuke said that if it was him, they should know him. He was shown on the news, the one who saved the people in the Red Dungeon, if he remembered his name correctly. MC continued on for him. Rui Awasawa. He agreed with him and said that it was him. He'd seen his photo. He's a hottie. Yuma thought, so Rui has one of the highest mana growth rates in history. In other words, his talent is recognized even by adventurers from other countries. Talented and diligent. How can he compare to his childhood friend? Hamanaka adjusted his glasses and said that there was also a rumor that there was a student in the 3rd grade with a mana growth of 0. MC's expression sank and he asked, is that so? Yuma was frightened and began to shake. He looked at the document that stated the mana growth was 0. MC remembered Shion saying that it looked like this time they would have to defeat the red slime from the red dungeon. Defeating it quickly raised mana, making it perfect for testing. Yuma said that she said that raising his mana would be easy for him. A new uniform. Hamanaka asked if the zero guy was Yuma. He snatched the document from him and asked, seriously, he should show it. Ryosuke said, it really is zero, which is actually impressive. He managed to pass with such stats. Normally, a person would have failed without question. MC replied in the negative and said they'd gotten it all wrong. He got excellent marks in both the theory and practical tests. Yuma thought that even he didn't think his mana would remain at 0. Ryosuke gave MC a reassuring nudge and told him not to be so sad. Ryosuke, his mana value is 0.23. Ryosuke said that while they certainly weren't 0, they were still low. They weren't that different from him. Hamanaka, mana value 0.19. He said, well, they don't have the talent to grow their mana. Nothing can be done about it, but it's too early for them to give up. They're just slow to open up because their upper mana limit could be huge. It's worrisome to start with such a large gap in strength, right? But the main thing is, they need to reach the finish line, even if it's slow. His words inspired the others. Yuma said, really? Ryosuke said, they were late-blooming geniuses, and everything was just beginning. They cheered. MC thought, and just like that, the three of them gathered their strength and worked hard. They trained in a simulated environment, studying the laws of dungeons and corporate affairs like crazy. The rest of the time, they spent in the blue dungeon, fighting monsters. He asked if he wanted to train in the simulated dungeon again. Yuma responded positively and said that since he was in 3rd grade, even if it was a small thing, he wanted to give it his all to awaken his powers. He said how passionate he was. Well, good. MC thought that his stats were the lowest, so he needed to try even harder than Ryosuke and Hamanaka. He's sure his powers will awaken if he dedicates himself to training. He needs to increase his mana. Ryosuke has a mana value of 41.23. Hamanaka has a mana value of 35.62. The main character has a stable mana of 0. Ryosuke told Yuma that his mana is always 0, so that's his limit. If it hasn't increased by a single point, it can't even be called late maturation. Well, the worst part now is that they all need to raise their mana to 50 by the midterm exam to avoid expulsion. Hamanaka said sadly that it seems it's impossible for someone like him to become a seeker after all. He said, there's still time. They need to try hard until the very end. MC thought that the problem of increasing mana wasn't just the three of them. Among their classmates in the 3rd grade, the number of sad students is growing. This is a world where hard work alone isn't enough. Talent is also needed. At that moment, Yuma received a notification. Kade texted him asking how he was doing. Was he trying hard? MC responded positively, saying he was working harder than ever. He thought the difference between them, when they first started, was inhuman, the gap between their talents. He understood everything, but he didn't want to give up. He had to somehow pass the midterms and graduate from STI with Rui and Kade. International Dungeon Research Organization. Ethan asked him if he'd found any information. The assistant replied negatively, saying he'd said everything, but he hadn't found a word about the Black Queen. He asked because they still hadn't fully deciphered the stone tablet, right? Had the Black King really been defeated? Ethan smiled and replied that it was certainly true. He had no doubt about the stone tablet. He asked him what? Then, after compiling all the opinions regarding the artificial dungeon, he had a request for a report on it. Ethan asked, an artificial dungeon? He replied that he didn't need to openly display his disgust. Strange incidents related to artificial dungeons were currently happening all over the world, and they needed to find the cause. Things would only get more complicated with time. Ethan asked, did he know that doing such things was harmful? He'd been against artificial dungeons from the start, especially the research on monsters they conducted there. They know too little about dungeons. Trying to create them manually is laughable, don't you think? Overestimating science is asking for trouble. June, 2 months since joining STI, a joint dungeon exploration simulation. Rui called Yuma. MC greeted him and said they were going to the 3rd floor of the artificial dungeon today. Rui said that 15 people were chosen from the 1st class. Yuma thought Rui was among them. That was obvious. And the other participants, Shion. So what? Kade, is she coming too? She answered positively and said that since there are already 2 messiahs here, the adventurers are here for protection. In training, they use a map to navigate the 3rd floor, and they will thus be magic stones. Although in real dungeons, they often don't know the surroundings and paths. MC replied that he understood. Then he saw Rui's sword. He asked, what about this sword? Rui replied that it was an enchanted weapon, embedded with a magic stone, and if mana was channeled into it, it could cast powerful magic. Yuma said magic. And that ruby he got from the monster, he heard he'd used it. Was that true? Rui responded positively and said he thought he should test it out during training today. MC asked, is that so? The magic stone Rui had gotten in the red dungeon while he was still in school, a silvery scarlet ruby. Its mana value was 700, and it could fetch at least 14 million yen on the market. Yuma thought that if he could use it, then Rui's mana was worth over 700. Rui waved and said he had to go. Someone in the crowd said they needed to go to the observation room to keep an eye on the chosen guys. That sounded good. MC thought he really needed to pull himself together. The pit between them kept growing. STI, artificial dungeon, floor B5, lab area. He said he thought it was time to start training on the floors above. He asked if the sounds or vibrations would reach them. He answered no and said they would have problems with these guys if the dungeon was that fragile. He asked how Adamus was doing. He answered no problem, she was so docile. He asked what about Persephone. He said she was acting up recently, but she'd calmed down. Well, even if she went berserk, it wouldn't be able to get through the reinforced glass. That would be a problem. He said it was an egg. They'd been observing it for a while. Would it really hatch? They checked its contents, right? It was definitely a monster egg, but if it hatched, wouldn't they be in danger? They didn't know what kind of monster was inside. He said the egg was discovered on the 36th floor of the green dungeon, not that deep, and it was just a hatchling, so everything would be fine. He asked, was he so sure of that? Even if it suddenly hatched and turned out to be dangerous, it wouldn't be able to escape from this room, thanks to all the adventurers here. At that moment, they heard a sound on the computer. They looked at it at the same time and asked, what, is that an ECG? What? The next moment, something cut off their heads. He said that they would now begin observing the selected students in a simulation training. The STI observation room. He said that this dungeon was a dangerous place. Defeating monsters was important, of course, but returning safely was even more important. Unfortunately, some of them would be expelled after the midterms, but they should still closely monitor the training and their strict standards. He ordered the lights to be turned on. At that moment, they saw Rui and Shion on the screens. Yuma said it was incredible. Ryosuke said that it seemed that not everyone can use enchanted weapons. Certain abilities are required. Rui and Shion have them. You could shovel a ton. Hamanaka said that he heard that they are tough, but that's not human level at all, right? MC, looking at them, exhaled and thought that the fight was completely one-sided. For Rui, this training was probably like a walk in the park. The next moment, an alarm was heard. He asked, what's going on? Is this an alarm? Alarm. Danger detected. They need to listen to the teachers and proceed to the exit. It repeats. He asked, is this a mistake? What the hell happened? He said that they need to remain calm. They need to begin evacuation, starting with the front row. Yuma turned to the screen and thought, did Rui and the others hear the alarm? It seems they don't know anything. At that moment, MC saw Kade on the screen behind everyone. The next moment, she fell through the ground. Yuma saw all this and rushed to the exit. He asked, where is he going? He should go back. MC thought it was the student who fell. He barely saw her face, but he had no doubt it was Kade. He said that things were bad. Kade had fallen. Rui looked down and thought that he needed to calm down. He didn't need to panic and needed to assess the situation soberly. He said that apparently something happened downstairs. That's why they heard the sound. He would go down, and they should evacuate. She said that then they would too. He told her that everything was fine, they didn't need to worry, it would be faster if he went alone. She said that he was right, their abilities were too different from his. Shion said that if abilities were the deciding factor, then she would go too. He said that they needed to leave quickly, and they also needed to tell the security investigators that they were heading deeper. They responded positively and told them to be careful. Rui thanked her. She asked how she could not come to the aid of a classmate. Then the two of them jumped down. She said it was dark in here. Rui said he would light the way with magic. He looked around and asked, no one? Where did she go? If she was just hit, she should have been lying there. Shion crouched down and said he needed to see if it was blood. He said he didn't think she walked on her own. Something had dragged her away. She said she was in danger and they should go. He agreed with her. Yuma peeked out and wondered how he could blend in with the crowd and get into the dungeon. Suddenly, someone called out to him and asked what he was doing here. MC wondered if it was the researcher in charge of security. He told him he was just worried about a friend who had gone into the dungeon. The researcher told him they were just heading to help the students in the dungeon, and he should listen to the teachers and evacuate to a safe place quickly. Yuma thought, even though he said so, finding Kade wasn't a priority for them. That means he has to do it. He has to. He needs to think of a way to get there unnoticed quickly. At that moment, a man passed by a piece of equipment. MC looked at it and thought, is this the same equipment they use in the dungeon? This is it, if he can hide in it. Okay, he's in the camera's blind spot. While no one is looking, he needs to act. He transformed into another form and thought that he needs to turn into a liquid. Great, he managed to get into the bag. She should be waiting for him. He will definitely save her. An artificial dungeon, a laboratory on the 5th floor. They went inside and he said what? He said, damn, everyone is dead. He said he needs to check. The reinforced glass of the cage is broken, and there are no monsters inside. They escaped. At that moment, a monster appeared above him. He screamed as the monster started eating his head. He asked it, how is he? He will help him now. Yuma made his way further and further. A laboratory for observing high-risk creatures. The next moment, a monster appeared in front of MC. He said they needed to take this equipment inside. He asked what was in the bag. He replied that it contained a magic weapon, and that he needed to take that too. He took the bag and said, was it really that heavy? His shoulder was about to fall off. He asked him if he was completely out of his mind. He had equipment in there that usually required 2 people to carry. He didn't need to be so brazen. Yuma was in the bag at the time and apologized. It was because of him that the bag was so heavy. He managed to get inside, but how could he find Katie? While they were carrying him, he clearly wouldn't be able to look out. MC was eavesdropping on the conversation at that moment. He asked if everything was okay. He answered negatively and said that one of them fell through the floor onto the 4th floor. 2 went to help her. He said that was working. There were 3 more down there now. Yuma thought there couldn't be a mistake. It was the voice of one of the group of students, so Katie had fallen down. He couldn't hear Rui and Shion's voices. Did that mean they went down after her? He said they needed to evacuate upstairs, and they would hurry to the 4th floor. MC thought Katie was there now. Okay, let them keep carrying him. He asked, so where is that fallen student? Artificial dungeon, 4th floor. He said there was something down there. He asked, is it a monster? They need to get their weapons. At that moment, he started to open his bag. Yuma thought, damn, they're going to open the bag now. He thought about pressing himself against the bottom temporarily to avoid being hit by hands. MC peeked out of the bag and thought, this is the 4th floor. No one is looking in his direction. He needs to act now. Yuma jumped down and thought, sure, he's a little worried about the monsters, but he'll leave them to the professional searchers while he looks for Katie. He asked, is that Soul Mantis? He laughed and asked why he suddenly mentioned the name of a foreign monster. Besides, isn't Soul Mantis a deep-sea monster? To defeat one of those, you need a whole group of top-notch searchers. Where would it come from here? The next second, the monster cut all 3 in half. Someone said on the radio that they need to respond. The rescue team is speaking. They've boarded the train with the monster on the 4th floor. He's sure it's a deep-sea monster, Soul Mantis. Shion asked how much longer. Rui asked her if she was tired. She replied that he didn't need to talk nonsense. He just irritated her. That's all. If they were done, then they should move on. He laughed. He said that the 2 of them had defeated about 100. She said she hadn't counted. She didn't want to. There are monsters in the world that look like animals and reptiles. So why does the STI lab only collect insect monsters? Rui said that maybe because they are easier to collect since they live in colonies. She said that even so, they are terribly disgusting. How could they not understand that? On the plus side, insect monsters are vulnerable to her wind magic and his fire magic, so they won't cause any problems. He answered positively and said that all they had to do was find Katie. The next moment, he heard some sounds. They looked in front of them and saw a monster. She said that this monster, they were told about it in class. He replied that he thought so too, but what? What was Arachne from the Green Dungeon doing here? Rui thought a monster that controlled steel threads that could cut through anything. They can't defeat it now, but perhaps it's blocking their path to Katie. At that moment, the monster began to attack them. Shion screamed that they had no chance. They had to run. He thought that they couldn't handle it, but they had to save Katie, even if they had to go around. The monster started making some noises. At that moment, MC hung from the threads above and said, what will he do? This isn't a lab, it's some kind of labyrinth, and where should he go now? What is that? Something slimy. What? A thread. Yuma looked down and said, there's something. It's rising. At that moment, Arachne rose up from MC. It started pushing Yuma, as if playing with him. MC said that it needs to stop. It needs to let him go. He can get out if he turns into liquid metal. He turned into liquid and said that something is stuck. That's right. He hid his clothes inside the metal. That's why it got stuck. Physical transformation. Clothes inside. Yuma said that he didn't want to tear his clothes. That means he'll turn his whole body into a sword. MC landed and said, great. He made it out. He looked at the monster that was heading towards him and said, here it is. Okay, it asked for it. Yuma transformed into another form and said that he needed to save Katie, so this one needs to be faster. It started attacking MC. Yuma said that it was weaker than he thought. The next moment, he dealt with the monster and said that he had it figured out. MC remembered how he said that the artificial dungeon contains many monsters that are used for training. He said, well, that's about the strength of the monsters they train on. Didn't seem to have dropped the magic stone. No, he doesn't have time for that now. He has to look for Katie. Yuma was walking down the floor and asked, what's wrong? Why are there so many holes here? The next moment, 3 monsters appeared behind him. Katie was lying on one of them. MC called out to her and said that they need to get their paws off her. He turned his hand into a sword and pierced the monster with it. He dealt with all the monsters and ran to his friend. He worriedly asked, what should he do? What if she's already dead? He approached her and said, thank goodness she's alive. Or maybe she's injured, but it's best not to move her too much, right? Then he heard her snoring. Yuma relaxed, smiled and said, she's sleeping peacefully. The next moment, he told her that everything was fine. He'd come for her. He thought that he'd seen this kind of development before in popular fantasy manga. In those places where princes and princesses appear, he's the spitting image of a prince right now. Right? Princess Katie. It's okay. He came to save her. At that moment, she opened her eyes and called out to MC. However, she saw something that looked like a monster in front of her. She screamed and lost consciousness. Yuma asked what happened. Then he realized and said that he looked like a monster now. He apologized to her. He said, well, he needs to take her to a safe place. Will the way he came here do? At that moment, the monsters he recently slaughtered appeared behind him again. The monster wrapped itself around his body. MC asked, what? Was it still alive? Damn, it needs to let go. While they were struggling, they fell even lower to the 5th floor. Yuma's scream made Rui and Shion turn around and noticed Katie. He said that some sound just came from there. They need to go check it out. He called out to her. She sat down next to her and said it was okay. She was alive. They needed to get back. They couldn't fight the monsters now. they would have to proceed with extreme caution. Rui said she was right. If they encounter Arachne, they are finished. They had no weapons left. He would check the route. He was counting on her. MC lay in the ruins and said, "Wow, he flew like that. Looks like he's on the 5th floor. Damn that centipede. It will answer for this." He needed to get back to Kade, to the 4th floor, quickly. However, at that moment, Yuma saw not only the centipede but also another monster in front of him. He asked, "Who is that?" "Seeker Training Institute, main building. Emergency meeting in the director's office." The director said, "What's the current situation?" "Director of the Tokyo Seeker Training Institute, Nonomura." The assistant responded affirmatively and said that they currently knew that all the monsters from the laboratory had escaped to the 4th and 5th floors and were running amok there. Contact had been lost with the adventurers sent to bring the situation under control. 3 STI students had also disappeared in the artificial dungeon. The director said things were even worse than he'd imagined. He thought that if the students were in danger, they should seek support not only from the government, but also from the International Dungeon Association. But if things got that far, the existence of STI might be in question. He asked, "What measures have been taken?" He replied that they'd contacted the Ministry of Defense and the police, and evacuation of nearby residents had already begun. They also contacted ELCID. They said that they would send groups of the best searchers. The director replied that he understood. They knew exactly which monsters had escaped. He answered positively and said that, according to the report, 3 types of monsters are considered particularly dangerous, mid and high-level monsters that were being studied under direct orders from the government. The first is the Atoms, a multi-legged monster whose entire body is covered in a hard shell. It lives around the 50th floor of the Green Dungeon. Its appearance resembles a giant woodlouse, but its durable body makes it an extremely formidable opponent. Their shells are said to be able to withstand a Patriot missile strike, and they are also resistant to magic, so defeating them is a very difficult task. He asked, "So how do you defeat them?" He replied that even high-ranking hunters would have a hard time, let alone capturing them. At that moment, MC was fighting the monsters. He pierced the monster through and said, "Wow, that crunch, and they're softer than he thought. They won't cause any problems." Yuma said, "Well, the giant lollipop is defeated." The assistant said the second species was a monster called Persephone. They had 3 giant heads and lived on about the 60th floor of the Green Dungeon. The director asked if they were more dangerous than the Atomus. He answered yes, saying that their strong, rigid exoskeleton protected them well. Furthermore, upon sensing danger, they begin to secrete a deadly poison. The director asked fearfully, "Poison?" The assistant said that 1 drop of this poison is enough to kill a person. The director asked again fearfully, "1?" The assistant said, "That's why close combat with these monsters is considered self-destruction. Usually, several high-ranking adventurers specializing in long-range combat are needed to defeat them." The director wondered if it would take time for the ELCID research team to arrive. Would the students be able to hold out until then? Meanwhile, MC was still fighting the monsters. He said they had soiled him. "What are they doing? They shouldn't spit. They're disgusting. Why are they stuck to Kade?" The monsters were trying in every way to harm Yuma. MC shouted that they shouldn't drool. "What's going on, that one?" Yuma dealt with the centipedes. A notification popped up. The Yodoramakatas have been defeated. MC pointed at the next monster and said that this one needed to be prepared. That was the only one left. The director asked, "What's the third kind?" The assistant replied that the third most dangerous monster in the lab was the Arachne. It was a powerful monster with a humanoid body on top and a spider-like body underneath. It was captured by ELCID's best group of seekers on the 86th floor of the Green Dungeon. 2 high-ranking adventurers died in that battle. The threads the Arachne released, capable of cutting through anything, made this species even more dangerous than the previous 2. The director slammed his fist on the table and said, "Why the hell did they keep such dangerous monsters? Their priorities should be the safety of the staff." The assistant trembled and said that the research was commissioned by the government. To fully develop the dungeon, they must study its inhabitants. This laboratory was chosen because it was the most secure facility. Also, since the jurisdiction of the Seeker Training Institute in the 3rd sector and the underground laboratory was divided, they couldn't object. The director sat back in his chair and cursed. The assistant said he was very sorry. The director replied in the negative. The assistant said, "And frankly, there's another problem." The director wondered if they had any other problems besides this. The assistant said that shortly before contact with the rescue team was lost, one of the seekers said something strange. He said they encountered a monster on the 4th floor of the laboratory. Definitely one of the deep-seated monsters, a soul mantis. The director was terrified. The assistant said he was just a manager, coming from a private business background, and knew little about dungeons and monsters. But even he had heard of deep-seated monsters. Deep-sea monsters are monsters that dwell in the deepest floors of dungeons, unaffected by conventional weapons. Monsters that even 10 high-ranking adventurers couldn't handle. He said that deep-sea monsters were impossible to capture for research, but fossilized eggs were discovered in the Green Dungeon of Fuquoc, and last month they were brought here for research. Apparently, they were the eggs of a deep-sea monster, soul mantis. He said, "What nonsense, a deep-sea monster. It must be stronger than Arachne, right?" He answered positively, saying that Arachne's strength was incomparable to soul mantis's, its body stronger than steel. each of its 4 arms wielding a scythe capable of cutting through anything, and its speed was astounding. Moreover, it can use wind magic. Its wind blades can cut through tank armor like paper. Besides, the deep monsters have the ability to revive. Defeating such a monster is an indescribably difficult task. There's a chance that the ELCID groups won't be enough. They might have to send a kill order to all the adventurers in Japan. The director thought it was useless. He couldn't even imagine how to fix the situation. So how should they solve this unsolvable problem? Yuma asked if something had hit him. What strange movements? What was it doing? MC replied in the negative and said he'd seen something like that somewhere before. Right, a green metal slime. So what had hit him earlier was wind magic? That's amazing. Suddenly, the nasty mantis showed his cool side. He was doing great. Yuma said it had to stop. He has magic and wind resistance, thanks to the green magic stone, right? In other words, if he didn't have this resistance, he might have been hurt. Of course, he's the final boss of this artificial dungeon, right? It's on the bottom floor, it can use magic, and it's a powerful monster. The monster is a strange spider, 2 giant woodlice, slobbering centipedes. All he has to do is defeat this, the dungeon boss. Who knows? Maybe he'll even be able to raise his mana stat for the midterm exam. His mana growth isn't great, of course, but defeating a monster of this level will definitely boost it. MC said he was overwhelmed with motivation. He'll defeat this and raise his mana, and then he'll save K-Dade. Yuma began fighting the strongest monster. MC thought it had no effect at all. He was so scared he screamed. He was attacking so vigorously, he even felt awkward. All the monster's attacks had no effect on Yuma. The more the monster attacked, the more it realized it was pointless. MC thought he was sure it could be a good addition to the training of the other STI students, and what could he expect from him? He was a weirdo, standing there all made of metal. He told him it was time for him to go help K-Day. He apologized beforehand. At that moment, Yuma attacked the monster. He said it was a special technique, a crocodile. MC dealt with the monster and thought, so where should he go to get back up? He needed to get back to the 4th floor. Yuma turned and looked at the monster, which began to move. He remembered his classmates saying that some monsters had the ability to resurrect. MC saw the monster reassemble and said that it was cool. Now that's what he calls a final boss. He remembered how he asked him, and how do you defeat them? He answered that you can hinder resurrection with magic or inflict so much damage that resurrection is impossible. Yuma said, well, he could probably do that. He'd have to get dirty, but what can you do? He hit the monster again and said it couldn't use magic, and he didn't really want to, but that's what he came up with. It shouldn't hold it against him. MC said that was excellent. The Wind Mage Mantis had been defeated. 20 of ELCID's best searchers had arrived. The search had already begun. 3 missing students had been found on the 1st floor. 1 girl was still unconscious and was being transported to the hospital. He called the captain and said that they'd thoroughly examined everything, but hadn't found any monsters anywhere, only clear signs that they'd been here. They looked up, and he said, and that crack, right, signs of wind magic use, and that kind of power at that. It was definitely Soul Mantis. It hatched in this dungeon. However, he can't think of any reason why it would use his magic so many times other than to fight an even stronger deep-sea monster. What was it fighting here?